Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we are taking a slow and peaceful journey back in time to the shores of the Aegean Sea, to a world of white marble, shimmering olive groves, and skies painted in hues of violet and gold. We are going to explore the quiet corners of ancient Greece, stepping away from the loud battles and grand political speeches, to simply observe the calming, everyday rhythms of a brilliant civilization. Imagine yourself standing on a gentle hill overlooking the city of Athens as the sun begins to set. The heat of the Mediterranean day is finally lifting, replaced by a cool, fragrant evening breeze that carries the scent of wild thyme, roasting figs, and the salty ocean air. This is a time when the world moved at the pace of nature, guided by the rising and setting of the sun, the changing of the seasons, and the gentle pull of the tides. As the sky deepens into a rich indigo, the first stars begin to appear, the very same stars that ancient sailors used to navigate the dark, mysterious waters of the Mediterranean. Down below, the city is settling into a peaceful evening routine. The grand temples on the Acropolis catch the last, fading light of the sun, their massive columns glowing with a soft, warm orange hue. These structures, built with such incredible precision, are not just places of worship, but monuments to a deep appreciation of beauty, proportion, and quiet balance. We often think of ancient Greece as a place of relentless action, but it was also a place of profound stillness and quiet contemplation. Let us walk slowly down the dusty, winding paths toward the heart of the city, feeling the warm earth beneath our feet, listening to the soft crunch of our own quiet footsteps. As we walk, we might notice the small, humble homes that line the narrow streets. Unlike the grand marble temples on the high hill, these houses are made of simple, sun-baked mud bricks and heavy wooden beams with roofs of terracotta tiles that click and settle as they cool in the evening air. Inside the enclosed courtyards of these homes, families are gathering around small, low clay hearths. The flickering firelight casts long, dancing shadows against the smooth, plastered walls. A mother is quietly grinding roasted barley on a heavy stone quern, the rhythmic, scraping sound echoing softly in the enclosed space. This simple act of grinding grain was the heartbeat of every ancient Greek household, a steady, soothing rhythm that anchored the day and provided comfort. Barley was the absolute staple of their diet, often kneaded into dense, nourishing loaves or mixed into a warm, thick porridge sweetened with a touch of dark honey. Near the hearth, a small clay lamp filled with golden olive oil is lit, its tiny, flickering flame pushing back the creeping dark. Olive oil was the lifeblood of this civilization, used not only for cooking, but for lighting their homes, cleansing their skin, and offering to the quiet gods of the household. The scent of burning olive oil is distinct, a rich, slightly earthy aroma that fills the night air and brings a deep sense of security and warmth. In another corner of the courtyard, an elder is softly telling a story to a sleepy child, their voice a low, melodic hum that blends with the chirping of crickets hiding in the dry grass outside the walls. They speak of ancient heroes and magical constellations, weaving myths into the very fabric of the dark night sky. Beyond the city walls, the landscape stretches out in a patchwork of silver and dark green. The olive trees, with their twisted, ancient trunks, stand like silent guardians on the rocky, terraced hillsides. Their leaves, silvery white on the underside, shimmer and rustle in the gentle night wind, sounding almost like the whispering of the distant sea. These trees were so revered that it was considered a severe crime to cut down a sacred olive tree. They were a symbol of peace, resilience, and the enduring grace of the natural world, taking decades to grow and providing sustenance for generations. The harvesting of these olives was a slow, communal task done by hand or by gently beating the branches with long wooden poles, catching the falling fruit in woven linen cloths, spread softly on the dry earth below. Further down the coast, the gentle waves of the Aegean Sea lap peacefully against the sandy shores. The water is a deep, tranquil blue-black, reflecting the bright silver light of the rising moon. Small wooden fishing boats are pulled up onto the beach, resting quietly after a long, sun-drenched day on the water. The fishermen have already mended their coarse flax nets, draping them over wooden racks to dry in the cool night breeze. The sea was everything to the ancient Greeks. It was their highway, their provider, and the endless horizon of their rich imagination. The rhythmic, repetitive sound of the waves breaking against the shoreline is perhaps the oldest and most comforting lullaby in the world, a constant, rolling sound that has lulled countless generations to sleep on these very shores. As we wander further through the darkened countryside, we might pass a secluded sanctuary dedicated to Asclepius, the gentle god of healing. Here, the air is thick with the sweet, heavy smoke of burning incense, pine resin, and dried healing herbs. People would travel great distances to come to these quiet sanctuaries, to seek rest and recovery, often participating in a practice known as incubation. They would sleep in specially designed, open-air porticos called Adverts. They believed that while they slept in these peaceful, sacred spaces, the god would visit them in their dreams and offer them a cure, a treatment, or a word of profound comfort. The atmosphere in these sanctuaries was intentionally designed to be deeply relaxing, surrounded by sacred springs of cool, clear water and shaded by ancient, whispering cypress trees. The sound of trickling water from a carved stone fountain echoes through the quiet courtyard of the sanctuary, a continuous, gentle melody that washes away the worries and anxieties of the waking day. It is easy to imagine lying down on a soft, heavy woolen blanket in one of these porticos, feeling the cool marble stone beneath you, listening to the water and the wind, and letting sleep slowly, gently overtake you. Life in ancient Greece was deeply intertwined with the natural world. They believed that every river, every ancient tree, and every mountain peak had its own spirit, its own quiet, observing life. This meant that the landscape was never truly empty. It was a living, breathing companion. When a farmer walked out into his fields in the early morning mist, he was not just walking on dirt. He was walking on the sacred body of the earth goddess, Demeter. When a potter sat at his heavy wooden wheel, shaping wet, smooth clay with his damp hands, he was participating in a craft that was guided by the steady, focused energy of Athena. This deep, spiritual connection to the physical world brought a sense of groundedness, respect, and quiet purpose to even the most ordinary, repetitive tasks. The Greeks were also masters of creating architectural spaces meant for quiet reflection and slow movement. The famous stoas, which were long, covered walkways lined with towering columns, were not just for bustling morning markets. In the heat of the afternoon, or the cool of the evening, people would walk slowly back and forth in the deep shade of these stoas, talking in low, hushed voices, or simply enjoying the peaceful rhythm of their own footsteps on the stone floor. The tall columns created a repeating pattern of light and shadow, a visual rhythm that is naturally calming and hypnotic to the human mind. The architecture itself was designed to bring a sense of order, harmony, and lasting peace to those who moved through it. In the quiet workshops scattered throughout the sleeping city, the tools of the daytime rest softly in the shadows. Consider the weaver's loom, a tall wooden frame leaning against the wall of a quiet room. Weaving in ancient Greece was a profoundly meditative task, almost entirely done by women within the home. They used a warp-weighted loom, where the vertical threads were held taut by small, teardrop-shaped terracotta weights tied to the bottom. During the day, the rhythmic clacking of these clay weights, swaying and striking each other, created a steady, musical background noise, like the ticking of a very slow, wooden clock. The process of spinning the raw sheep's wool into fine thread using a hand-held drop spindle was equally hypnotic. The spinner would draw out the fibers, give the wooden spindle a sharp twist, and watch it dance and spin in the air, winding the soft yarn in a continuous, mesmerizing motion that required both deep focus and a completely relaxed hand. The colors they dyed these woolen threads were drawn directly from the quiet earth and the sea. They used the dried roots of the madder plant to create rich, rusty reds and the delicate stigmas of the autumn crocus to dye fabrics a brilliant, sunny yellow saffron. The process of gathering these materials, boiling the vats of dye, and soaking the spun wool was unhurried, dictated by the slow, natural chemical reactions of the plants and the temperature of the fires. Everything took time. There was no rush, only the steady, measured pace of seasonal work. Further out into the countryside, beyond the olive groves, sit small, quiet apiaries. The ancient Greeks were master beekeepers, highly valuing honey as their primary source of sweetness. They kept their bees in cylindrical terracotta hives, carefully baked in the same kilns used for their beautiful pottery. In the warm afternoons, the air around these hives was filled with the low, steady, vibrating hum of thousands of bees, a sound that induces a heavy, sleepy feeling. The bees would feast on the wild thyme and oregano that grew stubbornly out of the rocky soil, giving ancient Greek honey a distinct floral flavor that is still celebrated today. Now, in the cool of the night, the hives are silent, the bees resting securely in their clay homes, while the faint, sweet scent of beeswax and honey lingers in the night air. This beeswax was not just a byproduct. It was essential for the quiet, studious moments of Greek life. they would pour melted beeswax into shallow wooden frames to create writing tablets. Using a sharp bronze tool called a stylus, students and scholars would slowly scratch their letters into the smooth, soft wax. The sound of the stylus carving into the wax was a soft, scratching whisper, a sound of quiet concentration. When they were finished, or if they made a mistake, they would simply use the flat end of the stylus to smooth the wax out again, erasing the past and leaving a clean, blank surface, much like a peaceful mind settling down for the night, letting go of the day's thoughts. And as the night deepens further, the whole ancient world seems to slow down to an almost complete stop. The loud, vibrant colors of the Mediterranean day have long faded into soft, monochromatic shades of slate gray and midnight blue. The animals have settled into their resting places. The flocks of sheep huddle closely together on the grassy hillsides, forming a soft, woolly mass against the dark, cool earth, guarded by sleepy shepherds wrapped tightly in their heavy, woven cloaks. The domestic dogs curl up by the fading embers of the courtyard hearths, their breathing slow, deep, and perfectly even. The only sounds left in this ancient world are the timeless, natural sounds of the deep night, the soft rustle of dry leaves in the wind, the distant, rhythmic, endless crash of the ocean waves on the sand, the occasional chirp of a solitary insect, and the gentle, whistling breeze moving smoothly through the tall marble columns of the high temples. It is a world at rest, deeply peaceful, grounded in nature and perfectly still, inviting us to let go of our own waking thoughts, to breathe in the cool, imagined air of the ancient Mediterranean, and to drift along with it, slowly and softly, into the quiet, welcoming depths of the night. As the deep night slowly begins to release its hold on the world, a subtle change occurs in the eastern sky. Long before the sun itself appears, a faint, pearl-like dryness begins to wash over the horizon, gently diluting the thick indigo of the night. The ancient Greeks believed this was the goddess Eos, the bringer of dawn, brushing the sky with her rosy fingers to clear away the darkness. The stars, which had burned so fiercely throughout the night, slowly begin to soften and fade, retreating one by one into the lightening canopy above. A profound, hushed stillness settles over the landscape during this quiet transition. The air is at its absolute coolest, carrying a crisp, refreshing dampness that settles as a fine lacer of silver dew across the curved terracotta roof tiles and the dusty leaves of the olive trees. The world seems to hold its breath, waiting peacefully for the return of the sun. Inside the simple mud brick homes, the day begins not with the harsh jangle of an alarm, but with the natural, gradual awakening of the body. A person might slowly open their eyes, feeling the soft, heavy weight of their woven woolen blanket. The air inside the room is cool and still, smelling faintly of the olive oil lamp that burned itself out hours ago, and the dry, sweet scent of the straw-stuffed mattress beneath them. Stepping out of bed, their bare feet meet the smooth, hard-packed earth or cool stones of the floor, a grounding sensation that instantly connects them to the waking world. They might wrap a thick, warm hymation, a large rectangular piece of woven wool, tightly around their shoulders to ward off the morning chill, moving slowly and deliberately into the central courtyard. The courtyard is bathed in the soft, shadowless light of the pre-dawn. This is a time for quiet, solitary routines. One of the first and most soothing tasks of the morning is the drawing of water. In the corner of the courtyard, or perhaps a short walk away, at a communal stone fountain, clear, cold water is gathered. The heavy, rounded clay pitcher, known as an amphora, is lowered down. The sound of the hollow clay striking the deep, echoing water is a resonant plunge, followed by the satisfying, heavy gurgle of the vessel filling up. Pulling the heavy, dripping pitcher back up requires a slow, steady rhythm of the arms and back. Splashing this incredibly cold, fresh water onto the face and hands is a vivid, awakening sensation, washing away the remnants of sleep and leaving the skin feeling tight and entirely refreshed. With the household slowly stirring, the hearth fire must be coaxed back to life. The ashes from the previous night are carefully pushed aside, revealing a few stubborn, glowing red embers hidden deep within the grey dust. A small handful of dry kindling, perhaps some brittle olive twigs or dried stalks of fennel, is placed gently over the heat. A few long, slow, deliberate breaths blow into the embers, the sound a quiet, rhythmic rushing of air, until a tiny ribbon of blue smoke curls upward, and a bright, fragile flame suddenly catches. The smell of wood smoke instantly fills the courtyard, a comforting, familiar scent that signals the true beginning of the daily routine. Breakfast is a beautifully simple, unhurried affair. There is no heavy cooking, no rushing to prepare complicated meals. It consists of a piece of coarse, dense barley bread, perhaps baked the day before, broken off with the hands. This bread is often dipped into a small clay bowl of wine that has been heavily watered down, softening the tough crust and providing a small, sweet burst of energy. Alongside the bread, a handful of wrinkled, salt-cured black olives or a few dried, sticky figs might be eaten. The meal is consumed slowly, often in complete silence, sitting on a low wooden stool in the courtyard, simply watching the sky turn from pale grey to a soft, luminous blue. As the sun finally crests the horizon, its first long, golden rays spill across the city, warming the white marble of the distant temples and casting long, stretching shadows across the dusty streets. The city begins to hum, but it is a low, gentle sound. Heavy wooden doors creak open on bronze hinges. The soft, rhythmic slapping of leather sandals on stone and dirt paths creates a steady heartbeat for the waking community. Neighbors passing each other in the narrow alleys nod gracefully, offering a quiet morning greeting, wishing each other health and a good day. The air remains relatively cool, making this early hour the perfect time for focused, deliberate work. In the potter's quarter, the craftsmen are already sitting at their heavy wooden wheels. The smell of the workshops is deeply earthy, a mixture of damp river clay and the lingering scent of ash from the firing kilns. The potter takes a heavy, wet lump of reddish-brown clay and throws it firmly onto the center of the wheel. With a rhythmic, powerful kick of their foot, the heavy stone or wooden wheel begins to spin. The sound is a low, hypnotic whirring. The potter dips their hands into a small bowl of water and cups the spinning clay. The friction makes a soft, slippery, shushing sound. Slowly, patiently, they press their thumbs into the center, pulling the walls of the vessel upward, transforming a shapeless lump of earth into a beautifully balanced, perfectly symmetrical jug. The level of focus required is immense, yet the physical movements are entirely fluid and relaxed, a moving meditation that has remained unchanged for generations. Out in the surrounding countryside, the morning air is filled with the scent of wild thyme and damp soil warming in the sun. Farmers are walking out to their small plots of land, guiding heavy, slow-moving oxen with gentle clicks of the tongue and soft taps of a long wooden reed. The wooden plough, tipped with bronze or iron, bites into the earth. The sound of the plough tearing through the soil is a deep, tearing crunch, turning over rich, dark furrows that release the deep, fertile smell of the earth into the air. The pace of the oxen is deliberate and plodding, impossible to rush, forcing the farmer to match their slow, ancient rhythm. This work is a partnership with the land, a deeply respectful process of preparing the soil for the seeds that will sustain their families through the coming year. Back within the city walls, the women of the house are tending to the small, enclosed gardens that often occupy a corner of the courtyard. Using a small, hollowed-out gourd or a simple clay jug, they carefully pour water over the roots of potted herbs. The water sinks slowly into the dry soil, and instantly, the sharp, clean fragrances of mint, oregano, and sweet basil are released into the warming air. These herbs are not just for cooking. They are used for teas, for medicines, and to simply sweeten the air of the home. The courtyard floor, made of packed earth or simple mosaics, is then swept with a broom made from a bundle of stiff, dry twigs bound tightly together. The sound of sweeping is a rhythmic, repeating scratch against the ground. A deeply satisfying sound of ordering one's environment, clearing away the dust of yesterday to make a clean space for today. In the public spaces, the elders of the city begin their morning strolls, draped elegantly in their woolen cloaks. They walk slowly toward the shaded groves or the open gymnasiums, supporting their weight on long, smooth wooden walking sticks that tap gently against the cobblestones. They gather in small groups under the sprawling branches of ancient plane trees, speaking in low, measured tones. They do not rush their conversations. They debate philosophy, discuss the changing of the seasons, and share observations about the natural world. There is a deep respect for the slow, careful articulation of thought, a belief that wisdom takes time to unfold, much like the slow opening of a flower in the morning sun. The morning stretches on, peaceful, structured, and profoundly calm, a testament to a life lived in deep harmony with the natural cycles of the day. As the sun climbs steadily higher into the vast, cloudless azure sky, the crisp, refreshing coolness of the early morning is slowly burned away, replaced by a thick, heavy blanket of radiant Mediterranean heat. The brilliant light strikes the white marble statues and the smooth limestone paving stones of the city, causing them to glow with an almost blinding intensity. The air itself begins to shimmer and waver slightly above the baked earth of the roads. The bustling, productive energy of the early morning market naturally begins to wind down, yielding to the overpowering warmth of the day. Vendors in the open squares slowly and methodically pack away their wooden stalls, carefully draping heavy, rough-woven linen cloths over their remaining wicker baskets of dried figs, roasted almonds, and pungent garlic to protect them from the fierce rays of the sun. The loud, echoing voices of merchants haggling over bronze coins fade into a low, sleepy, indistinct murmur that drifts lazily on the still air. Down a narrow, shaded side street, shielded from the direct glare of the sun. The warm, profoundly comforting aroma of baking bread drifts heavily from a small neighborhood bakery. The baker, his face flushed and glistening, with a fine sheen of sweat from the intense, enclosed heat of the roaring wood fire, is carefully pulling the last round loaves from the dark depths of a large, bell-shaped clay oven. He uses a long, smooth wooden peel to slide the heavy bread onto a rough wooden cooling rack. These loaves are wide and flat, their thick, chewy crusts baked to a deep, satisfying mahogany brown, some dotted with tiny, golden sesame seeds that have toasted in the heat. The smell of yeast, warm dough, and wood smoke is incredibly grounding, an ancient scent that speaks universally of deep nourishment, safety, and quiet satisfaction. The baker wipes his brow with the back of his flour-dusted arm, moving with the slow, deliberate, and peaceful exhaustion of a hard morning's work, ending just as the sun reaches its absolute peak. In ancient Greece, the intense midday heat was not something to be fought or worked through. It dictated a natural, unavoidable pause in the rhythm of daily life. It was a respected time to seek shelter, to find a deep, cool shadow, and simply surrender to rest. The heavy, solid wooden shutters of the simple mud brick houses are pulled tightly closed against the glaring streets, plunging the interior rooms into a soothing, protective, and velvety darkness. Families retreat into these cool, quiet, enclosed spaces, lying down on simple wooden bed frames, strung with woven leather straps, and covered with thick, undyed woolen blankets. The only sounds inside the house are the slow, even, rhythmic breathing of sleeping bodies, and the occasional, soft clinking of clay loom weights, swaying almost imperceptibly in the faint, sluggish breeze drifting through an open courtyard door. This midday rest was an essential, deeply ingrained part of their daily cycle, a quiet surrender to the environment, allowing the body to recover from the morning's labor while hiding from the fierce, unrelenting power of the midday sun. Outside in the quiet courtyards, thick vines of climbing ivy and heavy grapevines have been carefully trained over wooden pergolas, creating a dense, living canopy of wide, overlapping green leaves. Beneath this leafy roof, the air is noticeably cooler, holding a faint, earthy dampness that smells of wet soil and crushed greenery. The broad leaves cast intricate, shifting patterns of dappled, golden sunlight onto the packed earth floor, creating a mesmerizing, slow-moving mosaic of light and shadow that invites the heavy eyelids to soften and finally close. Domestic dogs stretch out lazily in the deepest, coolest patches of shade against the plastered walls, their paws twitching occasionally as they chase imaginary hares in their dreams, completely surrendered to the heavy, sleepy, thick atmosphere of the afternoon. Beyond the city walls, out in the vast sun-drenched countryside, the landscape is locked in a profound, heavy stillness. The farmers have retreated to the shade of the ancient trees, leaving their wooden ploughs resting silently in the dark furrows of the earth. This total silence is broken only by one of the most iconic and hypnotic sounds of the Mediterranean summer: the rhythmic, pulsing, overwhelming chorus of the cicadas, hidden deep within the rough, textured bark of the olive trees, and the dark, fragrant green needles of the Aleppo pines. Thousands of these invisible insects vibrate their bodies to create a loud, sustained, metallic drone. It is a continuous, swelling sound that rises and falls in vast, rolling waves, washing over the dry hillsides like the sound of a warm, invisible, rushing ocean. To the ancient Greeks, this endless, vibrating hum was the very lullaby of the summer heat, a sound so constant and all-encompassing that it eventually fades into a deeply comforting background frequency, pulling the wandering mind into a state of drowsy, peaceful trance. For those who chose not to sleep through the heat of the day, the midday hours were a perfect, quiet time to visit the local bathhouse, or lutron. Unlike the massive, echo-filled, bustling bathing complexes of later empires, these early Greek baths were often small, quiet, intimate spaces built directly over natural springs of cool, clear water. Stepping from the blinding, oppressive heat of the dusty street into the dim, humid interior of the stone bathhouse provided an instant, shivering shock of relief. The air inside is heavy with warm, drifting steam and the incredibly sweet, rich scent of perfumed massage oils. Clear water flows continuously from polished bronze spouts, shaped like the heads of sleeping lions, splashing softly and musically into shallow, circular stone basins. A person would stand quietly by these basins, using a terracotta pitcher to splash the wonderfully cool, refreshing water over their dusty, sun-baked skin. The ancient Greek process of cleaning the body was remarkably slow, tactile, and mindful. They did not use harsh, foaming soaps, but instead rubbed their bodies with a generous handful of fine, golden olive oil, carefully infused with the crushed, fragrant petals of wild roses or the deep, earthy scent of ground iris root. The slick oil mixed naturally with the dust and sweat of the morning's exertions. Then, holding a gracefully curved, blunt bronze tool called a strigil, they would slowly, rhythmically scrape the heavy oil away from their skin. The sound of the bronze strigil sliding smoothly against the oiled skin is a soft, satisfying, scraping whisper. This methodical process left the body feeling incredibly smooth, deeply clean, and entirely relaxed. Afterward, they might sit for a long time on a smooth, warm stone bench in the quietest corner of the steamy room, closing their eyes, letting the damp heat gently soothe their tired muscles and feeling a profound sense of physical peace and quiet renewal as the hottest hours of the day slowly drifted by outside. As the long, heavy afternoon slowly begins to wane, the blinding white light of the sun softens into a rich, poured honey gold. The fierce, direct heat that had forced the world into slumber gradually begins to lift, replaced by a gentle, tentative breeze that drifts lazily off the distant sea. This wind, known to the Greeks as Zephyrus, the mild west wind, rustles the stiff, dry leaves of the olive trees and brings a refreshing coolness to the baked earth. Slowly, naturally, the city begins to wake from its deep midday sleep. Heavy wooden shutters are pushed open on their bronze hinges with a long, echoing creak, inviting the sweet, cooling air back into the dim interiors of the mud-brick homes. People emerge from the dark, blinking softly in the changing light, stretching their limbs with the slow, relaxed movements of those who have truly rested. The pace of the late afternoon is noticeably different from the brisk, focused energy of the early morning. It is a time for quieter, less strenuous tasks that can be done sitting in the lengthening shadows of the courtyards. In one such courtyard, an older man sits on a low, three-legged wooden stool, deeply engrossed in repairing a broken wooden tool. He holds a piece of smooth, pale ash wood across his knees, using a small, curved iron knife to shave away thin, curling ribbons of wood. The sound of the knife sliding against the grain is a soft, rhythmic, shaving sound, a deeply satisfying repetition that requires patience and a steady, relaxed hand. The smell of the freshly cut ash wood is clean and subtly sweet, mingling with the scent of the dry earth. He does not rush his work, occasionally pausing to run his calloused thumb over the smoothed surface, feeling for any imperfections, entirely absorbed in the quiet, tactile reality of the wood. Nearby, sitting on the warm, packed earth, a group of children are playing a quiet, ancient game with small sheep knucklebones, called astragali. They toss the small, smoothed bones gently into the air, trying to catch them on the back of their hands with a soft, clicking clatter. Their voices are low, filled with soft laughter and hushed concentration, a gentle background melody to the slow afternoon. The simple joy of these tactile, earthen toys connects them directly to the pastoral life that surrounds their city walls, a life built entirely on what the land and the animals naturally provide. In the small, open-air kitchens attached to the courtyards, the preparation for the evening meal begins with a slow, deliberate grace. A woman sits beside a large, shallow woven basket filled with dried lentils, carefully sifting through the small, earthy brown legumes to remove any tiny stones or bits of chaff. The sound of the dry lentils shifting and sliding against the woven reeds of the basket is a soft, rushing whisper, like the sound of a distant, slow-moving river. She drops handfuls of the cleaned lentils into a heavy clay pot, the sound a dull, resonant thud against the fired earth. She then pours cool water over them from a beautifully painted clay pitcher, allowing the dry, hard legumes to slowly soften and expand. To flavor the simple stew, she takes a bunch of dried oregano that has been hanging from the wooden rafters and crushes it slowly between her palms. The dry leaves crackle softly, releasing a sharp, deeply savory fragrance that instantly perfumes the air. A clove of garlic is crushed on a flat stone with the heavy wooden handle of a knife, the sharp, pungent smell cutting through the warmth of the afternoon. These fundamental, ancient ingredients, lentils, garlic, herbs, and olive oil are the absolute foundation of the Mediterranean diet, providing simple, deep nourishment without extravagance. The heavy clay pot is then placed over a small, low fire, where it will simmer incredibly slowly for hours, filling the courtyard with the thick, rich, comforting aroma of a home-cooked meal as the sun continues its slow descent toward the horizon. Beyond the city walls, the shepherds who had rested with their flocks in the deep shade of the high pine forests begin the slow journey back toward the safety of the stone folds. The sheep move like a slow, grey river down the rocky hillside, their small hooves making a soft, collective clicking sound against the loose stones. The heavy bronze bells, tied around the necks of the lead rams, chime with a dull, hollow, rhythmic clank that echoes softly across the valleys. This is a peaceful, ancient procession, a daily migration, guided by the lowering sun and the cooling air. The shepherds lean heavily on their tall, curved wooden staffs, walking with a slow, rolling, completely unhurried gait that matches the pace of their animals, a perfect reflection of a life lived in tune with the slow, steady heartbeat of the natural world. As the sun dips lower, casting impossibly long, violet shadows across the dusty roads, the women of the neighborhood take up their terracotta hydrias, the beautiful water jars with 3 handles, and walk slowly toward the communal fountain house. This is a time not just for gathering water, but for gentle, unhurried conversation in the cooling air. The fountain house is a shaded structure of cool limestone where water gushes continuously from stone spouts shaped like horse heads. The sound of the water splashing into the deep, dark basin is overwhelmingly peaceful, a constant, rushing music that washes away the fatigue of the long day. They take their time filling the heavy jars, letting the cold water run over their wrists, enjoying the deep, resonant echo of the stone chamber, their soft voices blending harmoniously with the endless, soothing song of the falling water. With the heavy terracotta jars now full and brimming, with incredibly cold, clear water, the women gently lift them, balancing the curved clay smoothly against their shoulders or atop their heads, using a soft, coiled ring of woven linen for padding. The water sloshes softly against the fired clay walls of the hydria, a deep, muted, rhythmic splashing that accompanies their slow walk back up the winding, dusty paths toward home. The cool dampness of the porous clay presses against their shoulders, offering a lingering, refreshing chill against the residual warmth of the day. Above them, the vast Mediterranean sky is beginning its spectacular, slow transition into twilight. The brilliant, poured honey gold of the late afternoon deepens into profound shades of bruised violet, soft magenta, and a dusty, glowing rose. High above the terracotta rooftops, small, dark silhouettes of swallows dart and glide in wide, sweeping arcs, catching the last of the day's warmth on their wings, their tiny, joyful chirps echoing faintly in the still air. Back in the enclosed courtyards, the lentil stew that had been simmering for hours over the low, dying embers is finally ready. The thick, fragrant steam rising from the heavy clay pot smells deeply of the earth, carrying the robust, savory notes of garlic, crushed oregano, and the rich, dark legumes. There is no grand dining hall, no formal, rigid seating arrangement for this everyday meal. The family simply gathers in the darkening courtyard, sitting on low wooden stools, or directly on the warm, packed earth, holding shallow, unglazed clay bowls in their hands. A large wooden ladle, worn smooth and dark by years of use, is dipped into the pot, pulling up the thick, comforting stew. The heavy, dark bread that was baked earlier in the heat of the day is torn apart with bare hands, the thick crust breaking with a satisfying, dry crunch. They use the bread as a tool, dipping it directly into the bowls to soak up the flavorful, oily broth. They eat slowly, chewing deliberately, savoring the simple, profound nourishment of the meal in a comfortable, shared silence. The only sounds are the soft scraping of wooden spoons against clay bowls, the gentle tearing of bread, and the distant, soothing chorus of crickets beginning to wake up in the dry brush beyond the city walls. As the last of the stew is finished, the eldest member of the household takes a small, beautifully painted cup filled with dark, sweet wine mixed heavily with pure water. Before drinking, they slowly tilt the cup, pouring a few dark, glistening drops directly onto the packed earth of the courtyard floor. This is a quiet, ancient libation, a deeply ingrained gesture of respect and gratitude to Hestia, the gentle goddess of the hearth, and to the protective spirits of the home. The wine soaks instantly into the dry soil, leaving a small, dark stain that smells faintly of grapes and the passing summer. With the meal complete, the shadows in the courtyard deepen into true darkness. It is time to bring forth the light once again. A small dry twig is pressed gently against the few remaining red-hot coals in the cooking fire, held there until a tiny, fragile flame suddenly blooms. This small fire is carried carefully to the small clay oil lamps that sit on low stone shelves around the courtyard walls. As the wick catches, a soft, warm, flickering, golden orange light pushes back the encroaching night. The flame casts long, dancing shadows that make the rough, plastered walls look soft and fluid. On the flat, thick roof of a nearby home, a lone figure climbs a sturdy wooden ladder to stand quietly under the vast, expanding dome of the night sky. The heat of the day radiates softly upward from the thick mud brick beneath their bare feet, while the air around their shoulders grows pleasantly cool. They look toward the western horizon, watching as the very first, impossibly bright star pierces through the fading purple twilight. This is Hesperus, the evening star, a steady, unblinking point of brilliant silver light that has guided sailors and comforted farmers for countless generations. The sky watcher does not have telescopes or complex instruments. They simply stand in complete stillness, breathing deeply, watching the slow, majestic rotation of the heavens. They trace the familiar patterns of the ancient constellations as they slowly reveal themselves against the deepening blackness, finding a profound, grounding comfort in the vast, unchanging predictability of the cosmos above. The city below is settling into a profound, heavy silence. The heavy wooden doors are bolted shut for the night, with a loud, final clunk of heavy iron. The dogs curl into tight, warm circles beside the flickering hearths, the air grows still and fragrant, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, cooling dust, and the salty breath of the distant invisible sea, wrapping the ancient world in a deep, peaceful embrace. With the city now fully wrapped in the dark, comforting blanket of the night, the interior of the Greek home becomes a sanctuary of pure rest. Lying upon the simple wooden bed frames, the body sinks heavily into mattresses stuffed tightly with dry, fragrant hay and crushed mint leaves. The heavy, undyed woolen blankets provide a deep, grounding weight, pressing softly against tired muscles and holding the body securely in place. In the corner of the small room, the tiny, solitary flame of the terracotta oil lamp finally begins to sputter. It drinks the very last, thick drops of golden olive oil, flickering wildly for a brief, silent moment before quietly extinguishing, plunging the room into an absolute, velvety blackness. There are no streetlights filtering through the heavy, bolted wooden shutters, no distant hum of machinery, only the pure, uninterrupted dark of the ancient world. The only anchor in this vast ocean of darkness is the slow, rhythmic, hypnotic sound of deep breathing, chests rising and falling in perfect, unconscious time with the sleeping household. Outside, high above the quiet, slumbering city, the moon begins its slow, brilliant ascent. The Greeks believed this glowing silver orb was the goddess Selene, driving her chariot drawn by two luminous, snow-white horses across the vast dome of the night sky. As her pure, cold light touches the earth, it transforms the landscape into a dreamlike world of stark contrasts. The rough, dusty paths and low mud brick homes are swallowed completely in deep, impenetrable shadows, while the grand, high temples of the Acropolis catch the moonlight perfectly. The towering columns of white Pentelic marble seem to glow from within, radiating a soft, ethereal luminescence that stands as a silent, majestic beacon above the sleeping population. The brilliant moonlight catches the polished bronze tip of a spear held by a towering, silent statue of Athena, creating a single, brilliant spark of silver that acts as a quiet, watchful guardian over the dreaming citizens below. Along the heavy, rough-hewn limestone walls that surround the city boundaries, the night watchmen walk their slow, deliberate rounds. Their thick leather sandals make a soft, rhythmic padding sound against the smooth paving stones of the ramparts, a slow, steady heartbeat that circles the perimeter of the sleeping world. They carry long, heavy wooden spears that rest lazily against their shoulders, walking without any sense of urgency. They stop frequently, leaning their weight heavily against the cold stone battlements to gaze out over the vast, darkened countryside below. The night air is remarkably clear, carrying sounds from miles away through the stillness. They listen to the distant, lonely hoot of a small Scops owl, a bird sacred to the goddess of wisdom, its soft, echoing call drifting through the dark, twisted branches of the ancient olive groves. It is a sound of profound peace, a confirmation that the wilderness beyond the walls is completely undisturbed, and resting down by the dark, glassy surface of the Aegean Sea, the world is equally hushed. A few small wooden fishing boats have ventured out into the shallow, sheltered coves practicing an ancient method of night fishing. From the bow of each small boat hangs an iron basket holding a small burning fire of highly resinous pine pitch. This is the pyrophany, casting a warm, flickering orange circle of light directly onto the black, perfectly still water. The fishermen stand perfectly motionless at the edge of the light, holding long, multi-pronged iron tridents, their silhouettes stark and dark against the glowing fire. The only sound is the incredibly soft, rhythmic dipping of a single wooden oar, steering the boat, a gentle swish and drip of water that sounds like a long, slow sigh. The light slowly attracts small silver fish and squid from the dark depths, drawing them up toward the surface where they hover, mesmerized by the sudden warmth and brightness. The patience of the fishermen is absolute. They can stand in complete silence for hours, breathing in the cold, salty night air, perfectly attuned to the subtle, almost imperceptible movements of the dark water below. Back within the city walls, the silence deepens even further. This is the realm of Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep, who drifts invisibly through the narrow, twisting alleyways, brushing the foreheads of the tired with a soft branch of a poppy plant, dripping with the dark, heavy waters of the river, Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. As the minds of the citizens fully let go of their daily worries and earthly tethers, they enter the domain of Morpheus, the shaper of dreams. The heavy, unyielding reality of the daytime world dissolves completely, replaced by fluid, shifting visions. The potter dreams of perfectly symmetrical, wet clay spinning endlessly on a wooden wheel. The farmer dreams of heavy, golden rain, falling gracefully on soft, dark soil. The sailor dreams of a favorable, steady wind, filling a vast, white linen sail beneath a clear sky. Their bodies remain entirely still, anchored securely to their heavy wooden beds, recovering and repairing, drawing profound strength from the deep, undisturbed quiet of the long Mediterranean night. As the night stretches toward its deepest, most silent hour, the great ancient constellations slowly wheel across the immense, dark dome of the Mediterranean sky. High above the sleeping city, the cluster of stars, known as the Pleiades, glitters like a handful of crushed diamonds, scattered across a vast sheet of black velvet. To the ancient Greeks, these seven sisters were not just beautiful points of light, but essential, silent timekeepers of the agricultural year, their slow rise and fall dictating the perfect, natural moments for ploughing the earth and harvesting the golden grain. Now, in the absolute dead of night, they slide silently toward the western horizon, watching over a world that has surrendered entirely to rest. Far out on the open, rolling expanse of the dark sea, a solitary merchant ship is making its slow, steady journey under this magnificent canopy of stars. The heavy, square linen sail is filled taut with a constant, gentle night wind, pushing the curved wooden hull smoothly through the dark, heavy water. The sound of the sea parting beneath the wooden prow is a continuous, rushing sigh, a deep, resonant hush that mingles perfectly with the slow, rhythmic creaking of the thick hemp ropes and heavy wooden masts. The helmsman sits quietly at the stern, his hands resting firmly and comfortably on the long wooden tiller. He does not need a compass or a map His calm eyes are fixed intently on the glowing constellation of the Great Bear, allowing the ancient, unmoving stars to safely guide his slow, lonely path across the featureless dark. The sea at this hour is a realm of profound isolation and deep quiet, entirely removed from the waking, bustling world of men, a place where time seems to stretch and expand into an endless, rolling present. Back on land, deep within the dark, silent heart of the city's neighborhood bakery, a slow, invisible magic is taking place. The baker has long since gone to his bed, wrapped heavily in his woolen blankets, leaving his large, heavy wooden troughs resting quietly on smooth stone benches. These rough-hewn troughs are filled with a fresh mixture of water, coarse barley flour, and the fermented, sour starter dough saved carefully from the previous day. In the quiet, residual warmth of the dim room, the heavy dough begins to slowly breathe and expand in the dark. It is a microscopic, silent transformation, the living yeast feeding and growing without any human intervention, releasing tiny, soft bubbles of air that gently push the dense dough upward against the damp, undyed linen cloths covering the wooden troughs. The smell lingering in the bakery is dense, slightly sour, and incredibly earthy, a deeply comforting promise of the nourishment that will inevitably come with the new day. This slow, unattended rising of the bread is a perfect, quiet symbol of the ancient night, a time when the world appears to be completely inactive, yet is secretly, fundamentally renewing itself. Out in the rugged, rocky hills that surround the fertile city plains, a small flock of sheep is huddled tightly together to ward off the cooling night air. In the center of this soft, woolly, breathing mass, the shepherd sleeps heavily against the dry earth, wrapped entirely in his thickest, coarsest cloak, drawing steady, comforting warmth from the resting animals that surround him on all sides. Beside him, an incredibly large, shaggy, Molossan sheepdog lies completely flat with its heavy head resting comfortably on its massive front paws. The dog's eyes are closed to the night, but its ears occasionally twitch, swiveling slowly and deliberately to catch the absolute faintest sound carried on the changing wind. The dog is a silent, completely reliable guardian, its slow, deep breath matching the exact rhythmic breathing of the slumbering flock. The deep connection between the sleeping shepherd, his loyal dog, and his gentle flock is ancient and profound, a bond built on a shared life, spent entirely in the open air, subject only to the slow, turning cycles of the weather and the vast wheeling stars above. Further up the winding mountain paths, near the sharp, rocky peaks that seem to scrape against the sky itself, the landscape becomes incredibly stark and silent. This high wilderness is the domain of Pan, the wild, unpredictable god of the untamed nature. But even the wild spirits of the mountains are said to sleep deeply during these darkest hours. The high mountain air is thin, piercingly crisp, and entirely still. Small, hardy shrubs cling tenaciously to the narrow cracks in the towering limestone cliffs, their small, dark leaves curled tightly against the sharp frost. The silence up here is absolute, an ancient, heavy stillness that is almost palpable, completely undisturbed by any human presence or echoing voice. It is a pure, vast silence that invites the wandering mind to expand, to drift far away from the small, daily concerns of the sleeping city far below, and to lose itself entirely in the vast, unchanging, sleepy majesty of the natural, ancient world resting under the stars. As the night reaches its absolute coldest and deepest point, a profound hush falls over the grand sanctuaries dedicated to the Olympian gods. These massive marble structures, built with such incredible care and devotion, stand completely empty of the daytime crowds. The tall, fluted columns, bleached bone white by the moonlight, cast long, parallel shadows across the smooth, polished stone floors. Deep within the central chamber of the temple, known as the naos, a single, eternal flame burns quietly on a heavy bronze tripod. The flame is small, yet it is the very soul of the sanctuary, a continuous, flickering ribbon of golden light that must never be allowed to go out. The air inside this sacred space is heavy and incredibly thick, with the lingering, ancient scent of crushed frankincense, dried myrrh, and the sweet, rich aroma of roasted barley that was offered to the gods hours before. Sitting quietly on a low wooden stool beside the bronze tripod is a solitary priest draped heavily in a thick, undyed woolen cloak that pools warmly around his sandaled feet. His eyes are heavy, blinking slowly against the overwhelming urge to sleep, but his mind remains anchored to his sacred, repetitive task. He holds a small pair of bronze tongs, occasionally reaching out with a slow, deliberate movement to gently adjust the burning olive wood, ensuring the flame breathes easily and steadily through the darkest hours. The soft, metallic clink of the bronze tongs against the heavy tripod is the only sound that echoes through the vast, empty marble halls, a tiny, resonant note of human devotion in the overwhelming silence. Outside the temple, the world is locked in the icy grip of the pre-dawn chill. The dew that had settled earlier in the evening now begins to freeze, coating the leaves of the sacred olive groves with a microscopic, glittering layer of silver frost. The sleeping city below appears as a completely motionless sea of dark, textured roofs huddled closely together for shared warmth against the cold. In the small, enclosed courtyards of these homes, the domestic animals shift restlessly in their sleep, seeking the warmest corners, near the still radiating heat of the stone hearths. A rooster, nestled deeply in the straw of a woven wicker basket, stirs slightly, fluffing its heavy feathers against the chill, sensing the very first, imperceptible shift in the Earth's rotation. But it remains silent, keeping its head tucked securely beneath its wing. This is the hour when the ancient world feels the most vulnerable, yet also the most deeply protected, cradled securely in the vast, unchanging rhythm of the cosmos. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the impenetrable blackness of the eastern horizon begins to weaken. The sharp, brilliant points of the stars start to lose their fierce, icy clarity, melting softly into a sky that is shifting from a deep, heavy indigo to a bruised, dusty purple. This is not yet the dawn, but rather the quiet, hesitant promise of it. Down in the narrow, winding streets of the city, a heavy wooden door creaks open with a long, resonant groan, breaking the total silence of the neighborhood. A solitary woman, an attendant to the nearby public fountain, steps out into the freezing air, drawing her thick woolen himation tightly across her face to block the stinging cold. She carries a long, stiff broom made of bound heather and dried twigs. Her task is simple, solitary, and deeply grounding. She walks slowly toward the marble fountain house, her leather sandals making a soft, crunching sound on the frosty dirt path. Reaching the stone structure, she begins to sweep the smooth limestone pavement around the flowing water. The sound of the stiff twigs scratching rhythmically against the stone is a harsh yet oddly comforting noise. A steady, repetitive scraping that signifies the slow, inevitable return of daily order. She works methodically in the near darkness, completely alone, her movements slow and unhurried, guided only by the very faint, grey light reflecting off the dark, endlessly flowing water of the stone basins. Her quiet labour is a bridge between the deep, unconscious world of the night and the bright, active world of the coming day, a small, unseen act of care that prepares the city for its awakening. As she sweeps, the continuous, musical rushing of the fountain water seems to grow louder in the quiet morning air, an endless, comforting waterfall that never sleeps. She pauses for a moment, leaning her weight lightly against the long wooden handle of her broom, and watches the water spill from the carved mouth of a stone lion into the deep collection pool below. The water is impossibly clear, looking almost black in the pre-dawn light, its surface constantly shivering and breaking with the force of the flow. She reaches into the folds of her heavy cloak, pulls out a small, unglazed clay cup, and dips it slowly into the freezing water. The cold radiates instantly through the porous clay, chilling her fingers. She brings the cup to her lips and drinks deeply. The water is sharp, incredibly crisp, and tastes faintly of deep earth and ancient limestone. It is a sudden, shocking burst of cold that fully awakens her senses, a pure, unadulterated taste of the land itself. Setting the cup down on a damp stone ledge, she resumes her slow, rhythmic sweeping, moving the small piles of fallen leaves and dust away from the sacred water source. High above her, on the steep rocky slopes of the Acropolis, the very first, subtle hints of colour are beginning to touch the highest, most exposed columns of the grand temples. The pale, chalky marble begins to absorb the faint, pearlescent glow of the approaching dawn, shifting from ghostly white to a very soft, delicate grey. The world is taking a long, deep, collective breath, balancing perfectly on the quiet edge of transition, holding on to the last, peaceful moments of the night before the sun returns to demand its daily labour. As the delicate grey light upon the high marble columns slowly begins to warm, a profound transformation sweeps across the eastern horizon. The deep, bruised purples of the retreating night are gently pushed aside by a soft, expanding wash of pale saffron and dusty rose. The ancient Greeks visualized this breathtaking daily event as the goddess Eos, rising from the ocean streams, spreading her saffron-colored robes across the sky to herald the coming of her brother, the sun. The light does not arrive all at once, but rather seeps into the world incredibly slowly, painting the wispy, high-altitude clouds with brilliant streaks of crushed peach and glowing gold. Below this spectacular canvas, the sleeping city begins to physically respond to the shifting light. The rough, textured terracotta roof tiles of the mud brick homes catch the very first horizontal rays of the morning, changing rapidly from dark, indistinct shapes into a sprawling, interconnected sea of warm, fired clay. The silver frost that had gathered on the olive leaves during the coldest hours of the night suddenly catches the dawn, transforming the surrounding hillsides into a shimmering, glittering expanse of microscopic diamonds, before slowly melting back into the dry earth. With the arrival of the true dawn, the profound, heavy silence of the night is finally broken, replaced by a slow, gentle symphony of waking sounds. The roosters, hidden in their small wooden enclosures within the courtyards, finally release their clarion calls. It is a natural, organic alarm clock, a sound that echoes back and forth across the flat roofs, rolling from one neighborhood to the next in a wave of morning greetings. In the gnarled branches of the ancient fig trees, small brown sparrows and finches begin their chaotic, joyful morning chorus, their tiny voices weaving together into a bright, energetic melody that fills the crisp, cold air. Inside the homes, the heavy wooden doors of the sleeping quarters are pulled open with soft, familiar creaks. A farmer steps out into his small, walled courtyard, wrapping his thick, undyed woolen cloak tightly across his chest, to ward off the biting chill of the morning mist that still clings stubbornly to the ground. His movements are slow, heavy with the remnants of sleep, entirely unhurried as he begins the very first, essential chore of the new day. He walks with a slow, heavy tread toward a small, fenced corner of the courtyard where a lone, shaggy brown goat is slowly chewing her morning cud. The goat blinks her startling, horizontal golden eyes at him, her breath pluming in small, white clouds in the freezing air. The farmer sits down on a low, smooth wooden stool, resting a heavy, beautifully carved wooden pail on the packed earth between his leather-sandaled feet. He leans his head gently against the warm, incredibly soft flank of the animal, a gesture of deep, quiet familiarity and trust. With slow, rhythmic, highly practiced motions, he begins to milk the goat. The very first streams of bright white milk hit the hollow bottom of the wooden pail with a sharp, musical, rhythmic pinging sound. As the pail slowly begins to fill, this bright sound deepens into a soft, frothy, continuous hush. The smell of the fresh, steaming milk is rich, incredibly sweet, and deeply earthy, mingling perfectly with the sharp scent of the cold morning air and the dry straw underfoot. The farmer closes his eyes for a moment, simply breathing in the warmth of the animal and enjoying the deeply meditative, repetitive rhythm of the task. His hands moving in a steady, hypnotic squeeze and pull that has not changed for centuries once the wooden pail is filled to the brim. With warm, bubbling milk, he sets it carefully on a high stone ledge to cool, and turns his attention to the small flock of chickens scratching quietly at the frozen dirt. Reaching into a deep woven basket, he pulls out a handful of dried barley grains. With a wide, sweeping motion of his arm, he scatters the golden seeds across the courtyard floor. The sound of the hard grains hitting the packed earth is a soft, dry patter like the very first drops of a sudden summer rain. The chickens immediately flock toward the sound, their small, sharp beaks striking the ground in a rapid, chaotic rhythm that provides a lively, percussive background noise to the quiet morning. This daily act of feeding the animals connects the farmer intimately to the fundamental cycle of life, a physical reminder that his survival is entirely dependent on the gentle, steady care he provides to the creatures that sustain his family. Down by the massive, towering limestone walls that protect the lower city, a far heavier, grander morning ritual is taking place. The night watchmen, shivering slightly in the dawn chill, walk down from the high ramparts to the main city gates. These gates are immense, constructed of incredibly thick, dark oak planks, reinforced with heavy, blackened iron studs and massive bronze hinges. The guards pull back the enormous, sliding wooden crossbars with a deep, echoing thud that vibrates through the stone archway. Together, pressing their shoulders against the rough wood, they push the heavy doors outward. The ancient bronze hinges release a long, low, magnificent groan that echoes loudly across the awakening plains. As the doors swing wide, they frame a breathtaking view of the vast, open countryside, still blanketed in a thick, rolling sea of white morning fog. The opening of the gates is the official release of the city's energy. Almost immediately, a slow, steady stream of farmers and laborers begins to pass through the stone archway, heading out into the misty fields. They walk in companionable silence, leading small, sure-footed donkeys laden with empty wicker baskets and heavy wooden plows. The sound of the donkey's small hooves clicking irregularly against the smooth limestone paving stones mixes with the soft, shuffling steps of the men's leather sandals. They carry small, unglazed clay jugs of watered wine and wrapped bundles of flat barley bread to sustain them through the long hours of labor ahead. As they walk out into the thick fog, their figures quickly become soft, indistinct silhouettes, swallowed by the vast, quiet landscape. The air out here smells incredibly fresh, a sharp mixture of wet, crushed grass, damp soil, and the distant, salty promise of the sea breeze that has yet to arrive. The world is vast, wide open, and brimming with the quiet, endless potential of a brand new day, slowly unfolding under the protective, golden light of the newly risen sun. As the farmers walk further away from the high city walls and deeper into the rolling valleys, the heavy, white blanket of the morning fog gradually begins to thin and lift. The rising sun, now a brilliant, glowing orb over the eastern hills, starts to burn away the damp mist, revealing the beautifully ordered, terraced landscapes of the ancient Greek countryside. They reach the sloping vineyards where the earth is incredibly dry and rocky, the perfect soil for cultivating the deep-rooted, resilient grapevines. The vines are carefully tied to low, sturdy wooden stakes, forming long, twisting rows that follow the natural, curved contours of the hills. At this early hour, the broad, jagged green leaves of the vines are still heavy with overnight dew, each leaf holding a dozen perfectly round, trembling water droplets that catch the morning light and sparkle like tiny, fragile glass beads. The air here smells intensely green and vibrant, a sharp, clean fragrance of damp earth, wet leaves, and the sweet, raw sap of the awakening plants. The farmers move slowly down the long rows, beginning the quiet, methodical work of tending the vines. They carry small, incredibly sharp iron pruning hooks, with curved, crescent-shaped blades attached to smooth, polished wooden handles. With slow, deliberate precision, a farmer inspects a twisting vine, gently running his calloused thumb over the rough, peeling bark. He selects a stray, wandering shoot and hooks the curved blade around its base. With a swift, smooth, practiced pull, he severs the thin branch. The sound is a crisp, satisfying, wet snap that echoes softly through the quiet, misty rows. A tiny bead of clear, sticky sap instantly wells up at the fresh cut, sealing the wound. This process of pruning is not rushed. It requires a deep, intimate understanding of the plant, a silent conversation between the farmer and the earth, to ensure the future harvest will be rich and abundant. The repetitive, rhythmic sounds of the iron blades snapping the green wood become a deeply soothing, natural melody accompanied only by the soft rustling of the leaves as the farmers push gently through the thick, green canopy. While the countryside settles into its slow, rhythmic agricultural labor, the heart of the city itself, the wide, open square known as the Agora, is also beginning to stir. However, it is not yet the loud, chaotic, bustling center of commerce that it will become at midday. The early morning Agora is a place of quiet, methodical preparation. The wide expanse of packed earth and smooth paving stones is still cast in the long, cool, refreshing shadows of the surrounding public buildings. Merchants and craftsmen arrive slowly, guiding small wooden carts or carrying heavy woven baskets upon their shoulders. They begin to set up their temporary stalls with a practiced, unhurried grace. Simple, rough-hewn wooden tables are unfolded, the wooden legs scraping softly against the stone ground with a hollow, resonant thud. The atmosphere is calm and focused, filled with the muted, heavy sounds of physical materials being carefully arranged. In one corner of the square, beneath the spreading branches of a solitary, ancient plane tree, a textile merchant is preparing his display. He heaves a massive, tightly bound bolt of woven wool onto his wooden table. With slow, heavy movements, he unties the coarse hemp ropes and begins to unroll the fabric. The heavy woolen cloth falls in thick, luxurious folds, the sound a soft, muffled, rushing sigh. The colors of the dyed wool are breathtaking. In the soft morning light, rich, deep hues extracted painstakingly from the natural world. There are bolts of brilliant saffron yellow, deep, earthy madder reds, and incredible oceanic blues created from fermented woad. The merchant runs his hands slowly over the textured surface of the cloth, smoothing out the wrinkles with a gentle, pressing motion. The air around his stall smells powerfully of the raw materials, a dense, earthy aroma of natural lanolin from the sheep's wool, mixed with the faint, sharp tang of the ancient plant dyes. It is a deeply tactile, grounding environment, a celebration of the slow, careful craftsmanship that turns raw, spun thread into these heavy, beautiful, protective garments. Just a few paces away, A potter is carefully arranging his fragile wares on a low stone wall. He unloads the fired clay vessels from a deep wicker basket, padded thickly with dry straw. He lifts each piece with incredible care, holding the smooth, curved handles of the painted amphorae and the wide, shallow bowls of the kylix drinking cups. As he sets them down gently onto the stone, the fired terracotta clinks together with a delicate, incredibly high-pitched, hollow ringing sound, a bright, musical chime that cuts clearly through the quiet murmur of the awakening market. He arranges them in perfect, satisfyingly symmetrical rows, ensuring that the intricate black figure paintings depicting ancient myths and slow, graceful processions are perfectly visible. The morning sun eventually clears the rooftops, striking the smooth, glazed surfaces of the pottery, causing the curved clay to gleam and shine warmly in the new light. The market is slowly assembling itself, piece by piece, an unhurried, peaceful ordering of the daily world before the heat and the crowds arrive. Varying the open square of the agora are the magnificent stoas, the long, covered walkways supported by rows of tall, deeply fluted marble columns. In these early, cool hours, the stoa is a sanctuary of profound peace and quiet contemplation. A solitary scholar, draped elegantly in a clean white linen himation, sits on a smooth, curved marble bench in the deep shade of the colonnade. He holds a tightly rolled papyrus scroll in his hands. The papyrus, imported at great expense from the distant banks of the Nile in Egypt, is brittle and delicate. With incredibly slow, deliberate movements, he begins to unroll the manuscript. The dried reeds of the papyrus crackle and hiss softly as the scroll is opened, a dry, whispering sound that speaks of ancient wisdom and deep study. The air around him smells faintly of the black ink, a mixture of fine soot and natural tree gum which has dried into crisp, dark letters across the pale, yellowed surface of the page. He leans over the text, his eyes moving slowly and rhythmically across the columns of Greek script, his lips moving silently as he absorbs the poetry or the philosophy written there. The long, straight shadows of the marble columns stretch across the polished floor, acting as a slow, silent sundial, marking the passage of the morning. It is a moment of total, uninterrupted focus, an environment perfectly designed for the slow, deep expansion of the human mind, insulated entirely from the physical labors of the world outside, resting purely in the quiet, endless realm of thought and measured reflection. Beyond the quiet, shadowed sanctuary of the Stoa, in the winding, narrow alleys that run just behind the bustling agora, the focused energy of the city's master craftsman begins to physically manifest. This is the district of the artisans, a place where raw, unyielding materials from the earth are slowly and methodically coerced into forms of breathtaking beauty. In a spacious, open-air workshop, the air is visibly thick with a fine, glittering white mist. This is the realm of the stone carver, the sculptor who works almost exclusively with the pure, flawless white marble quarried with immense effort from the steep, rocky slopes of Mount Pentelicus. The master sculptor stands quietly before a massive, rough-hewn block of the heavy stone, his eyes moving slowly across the jagged surface tracing invisible lines and forms that only he can see, hidden deep within the rock. He holds a heavy, dark iron mallet in one hand and a series of sharp, flat iron chisels in the other. His movements are not frantic or rushed, but incredibly measured, rhythmic, and devastatingly precise. He places the sharp, perfectly honed edge of the chisel against the cold, hard surface of the marble. With a short, controlled, incredibly powerful swing, the heavy mallet strikes the back of the chisel. The sound is a sharp, resonant, metallic clink, followed immediately by the duller, powdery crunch of the stone giving way. A small, perfect crescent of white marble fractures and falls softly to the dust-covered floor. He repeats this specific motion again and again, creating a steady, percussive heartbeat that echoes peacefully down the narrow alleyway. The smell of the workshop is entirely mineral, a dry, clean, chalky scent that coats the back of the throat and settles lightly on the skin. The master sculptor works incredibly slowly, removing only the very tiniest fragments of stone at a time, patiently releasing the smooth, idealized human form that he firmly believes has been sleeping silently inside the marble block for millennia. Every single strike requires absolute, unwavering focus, as a single, rushed mistake cannot ever be undone, fostering a deep, almost meditative patience that entirely defines the ancient craft. A short distance away, in a much smaller, deeply shadowed and dimly lit workshop, a completely different type of painstaking artistry is taking place. Here, the air is overwhelmingly hot and smells sharply of burning charcoal, melting flux, and hot metal. This is the jeweler's forge, a place of microscopic precision and intense, quiet concentration. The craftsman sits hunched over a very small, intensely hot clay brazier. He is working with pure, unalloyed gold, a metal so soft and malleable that it seems to capture the very essence of the warm summer sun. Using a pair of delicate, fine-tipped bronze tweezers, he carefully arranges dozens of incredibly tiny, perfectly round gold beads onto the surface of a flat, polished gold pendant. This ancient technique, known as granulation, requires an impossibly steady hand and a deeply relaxed, highly controlled breathing pattern. The craftsman inhales incredibly slowly, completely holding his breath, as he gently places each microscopic golden sphere, before exhaling softly, ensuring his natural trembling does not disturb the intricate, sweeping geometric patterns he is painstakingly creating. Once the delicate design is entirely laid out, he gently applies the intense heat of a small hollow reed blowpipe, directing a thin, highly focused stream of air directly into the glowing coals to momentarily melt the surface of the gold, permanently fusing the tiny beads into a spectacular, richly textured masterpiece. The light in the workshop is a dramatic, mesmerizing contrast of deep, velvety black shadows and the brilliant, blinding orange glow of the small fire, reflecting warmly off the craftsman's sweaty, focused brow and the glittering, precious metal in his hands. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs steadily higher, baking the heavy stone pavements of the city, the young men make their way toward the palaestra, the large, open-air wrestling school and gymnasium. The atmosphere here is not one of chaotic battle or loud aggression, but of deeply disciplined, rhythmic physical preparation. The central courtyard of the palaestra is a large, wide square of deeply churned, soft yellow sand surrounded on all four sides by shaded, marble-columned colonnades. Before any physical exertion or training begins, the athletes must properly prepare their bodies in the deep, cool, refreshing shade of an adjoining room called the Eleothesium. They silently begin this ancient, grounding ritual. They hold small, beautifully decorated ceramic flasks called aryballoi, which are filled to the brim with fine, fragrant, golden olive oil. Pouring a small, heavy pool of the thick oil into the cupped palms of their hands, they begin to massage it slowly and deeply into their skin. The sound is a soft, rhythmic slapping and sliding friction as the oil heavily coats their muscles, giving their skin a rich, gleaming, bronze luster in the dim, cool light of the room. This heavy oiling is absolutely essential, protecting the skin from the harsh, biting friction of the sand and the intense, drying, unrelenting rays of the Mediterranean sun. The air in the room is incredibly thick with the sweet, heavy scent of the warm olive oil, mixed with the underlying, dry, earthy smell of the dusty courtyard just outside the open doors. After the oil is thoroughly applied, they step out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the courtyard and begin to slowly, methodically stretch their limbs. They move simultaneously through a series of deliberate, sweeping poses, extending their arms and legs to their absolute physical limits, holding each difficult position with a profound, statuesque stillness that mimics the marble sculptures being carved in the workshops just a few streets away. Their breathing is loud, incredibly deep, and perfectly measured, drawing the warm, dusty morning air fully into the very bottom of their lungs, and exhaling it in slow, controlled, steady streams through their noses. It is a slow, moving meditation, a profound physical grounding that deeply connects the conscious mind to the slow, heavy, complicated mechanics of the human body, achieving a perfect, quiet balance of raw strength and profound grace as they prepare themselves for the intense physical rigors of the long day ahead. Once the athletes are thoroughly oiled and stretched, they move slowly out into the bright, sun-drenched center of the palaestra, their bare feet sinking deeply into the soft, churned yellow sand. The wrestling matches here are not the chaotic, frantic struggles of war, but highly stylized, deeply controlled expressions of leverage, balance, and profound physical awareness. Two young men face each other, lowering their center of gravity, their heavily oiled skin gleaming brilliantly in the harsh, direct sunlight. They step forward and lock their arms together, hands gripping wrists and shoulders with a firm, unyielding pressure. The sound of the match is incredibly muted. There are no loud shouts or cheers, only the deep, rhythmic, heavy exhalations of breath, and the soft, constant shifting and crunching of the dry sand beneath their feet. They move in slow, circular patterns, testing each other's strength with subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in weight. When a throw finally occurs, it is a fluid, sweeping arc of motion, ending with a heavy, muffled thud as a body meets the yielding sand. A fine golden cloud of dust rises lazily into the still air, catching the sunlight, before slowly settling back to the earth. After the match concludes, the athletes do not simply wash with water. They stand in the shaded edges of the courtyard, using the curved bronze strigil to patiently, rhythmically scrape away the thick, heavy paste of oil, sweat, and fine yellow sand from their skin. The sound is a soft, satisfying scrape that leaves the body feeling incredibly smooth, renewed, and deeply clean. They pour cool, fresh water over their heads from small clay jugs. The water cutting through the remaining oil and splashing softly onto the stone floor, washing away the intense physical exertion of the afternoon and preparing them for the quieter hours to come. Meanwhile, within the cool, shaded interiors of the domestic homes, the rhythmic, hypnotic work of the loom continues unabated. The women of the household sit before the tall, vertical wooden frames, surrounded by baskets of brilliantly dyed, spun wool. The warp-weighted loom operates with a slow, deeply satisfying mechanical rhythm. The weaver passes the wooden shuttle, carrying the horizontal thread smoothly between the taut vertical strings. Then, with a heavy wooden comb, she beats the new thread upward into the growing fabric with a firm, solid thud. The small, teardrop-shaped terracotta weights tied to the bottom of the strings clink and rattle softly with every movement, creating a constant, soothing musical backdrop to the quiet afternoon. The process of weaving requires immense patience and steady, unbroken focus. The fabric grows almost imperceptibly, line by line, a physical manifestation of time, passing slowly and peacefully in the enclosed sanctuary of the home. The smell of the lanolin in the wool is thick and comforting, mixing with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters above. Outside, in the open squares, the passage of time is marked not by the ticking of clocks, but by the slow, silent stretching of shadows across the earth. In the center of the city, a tall marble obelisk acts as a massive sundial. As the sun begins its long descent toward the western horizon, the sharp, dark shadow of the stone finger creeps slowly across the curved limestone pavement. A completely silent, unhurried reminder of the Earth's continuous rotation. The fierce, blinding white heat of the midday sun slowly softens into a rich, heavy, poured honey gold that bathes the entire city in a warm, nostalgic glow. The marble columns of the high temples take on a beautiful, soft apricot hue, their stark whiteness warmed and gentled by the departing light. The bustling agora naturally begins to empty, as the merchants methodically pack away their beautiful textiles and painted pottery, leaving the wide stone square to the lengthening shadows and the cool, arriving breeze. The master sculptor lays down his heavy iron mallet, sweeping the fine white marble dust from his calloused hands, satisfied with the tiny, perfect progress he has made on the silent stone. The scholar in the stoa gently rolls his fragile papyrus, scroll tightly closed, tying it with a simple leather cord, his mind full of ancient words and quiet philosophy. The farmers make their long, slow trek back through the great oak doors of the city gates, leading their tired donkeys toward home, their skins smelling of dry earth, crushed grape leaves, and the warm, fading sun. The city draws its people back, within its protective walls, like a deep, slow inhalation of breath. In the quiet courtyards, the hearth fires are rekindled, sending thin, fragrant ribbons of wood smoke, spiraling up into the bruised purple twilight. The heavy wooden doors are bolted shut, sealing the families inside their private sanctuaries of mud brick and warm terracotta. The simple, nourishing meals of barley bread, olives, and watered wine are shared in the comforting, flickering light of the small clay oil lamps. As the twilight deepens into true night, the great constellations emerge once again, taking their eternal, silent positions in the vast dark dome above. Hesperus, the evening star, shines brightly over the glassy, black surface of the Aegean Sea, guiding the last of the wooden fishing boats back to the safety of the shallow shores. This ancient world, built on the slow, steady rhythms of nature, understands the absolute necessity of rest. There is no resistance to the dark, no artificial lights to push back the encroaching night. They surrender to the darkness completely and willingly, allowing the deep quiet to wash over them, repairing their tired bodies and soothing their active minds. The air grows still and profoundly silent, broken only by the distant, rhythmic crashing of the ocean waves against the rocky coastline, a sound that has echoed through the millennia, a constant, rolling lullaby of the earth itself. As you lie in the quiet of your own space, let the deep, ancient peace of this world settle over you. Feel the heavy, grounding weight of the undyed woolen blankets. Breathe in the cool, fragrant night air, smelling faintly of wild thyme, burning olive oil, and the distant, salty sea. Let the slow, unhurried pace of the ancient Greek day become your own, releasing all tension, all thoughts of the waking world. The city is asleep, the gods are resting in their high marble temples, and the night is a vast, safe, and silent ocean. Drift slowly into the dark, guided by the ancient stars, and allow yourself to fall into a deep, completely undisturbed, and profoundly restful sleep.